Can we just agree that 2025 has been kind of an off year for movies? And listen, there's a lot of other stuff going on, okay? I'm not trying to insinuate that this is the biggest problem, but I really do think that this year has been a really weird year for movies, and consequently, I haven't seen as many because I haven't wanted to be disappointed, but I am catching up right now on some earlier movies that came out this year. So here's a rapid fire roundup of 4 movies that people have been asking me to review. First up, Bring Her Back. Now, this film did come out a while ago, but I still get the odd comment of people asking me what I thought about it. I just watched it last night. I did really like Talk to Me. I thought that this film was just okay. I love Sally Hawkins. I think she's wonderful in this. I think that, there's a lot of good performances and a lot of interesting ideas. I think that after seeing this and Talk to Me, I think the Filippo brothers have illustrated that they are capable as directors. They're capable of running a set and doing everything that they need to do. They're capable of getting great performances out of their actors, casting well, that kind of thing. The big picture ideas is kind of where I feel like their work could use some refinement, because I feel like this is kind of a really heavy-handed and literal metaphor. I also felt like first and foremost it was trying to scare you as opposed to doing anything else. Now a lot of people are going to be like, that's all I want. It's a horror movie. What else do you want? Sure. It's all fine and good. But I feel like when you're doing really intense gore and things that are meant to disgust the audience so viscerally that they become scared, that's when it starts to feel like a crutch, and I felt like that was the case in this film. I liked parts of it, and I thought, it genuinely did scare me at parts, but it felt kind of half-baked, honestly. I held off on watching The Phoenician Scheme for a long time because I'm a really big Wes Anderson fan. He's one of the directors that initially really got me into film when I was a teenager. And when a lot of the people that I respected had underwhelming responses to this film, I was nervous. I was really nervous to see it. And turns out that was the correct instinct, because I watched this movie yesterday. And while I do think that it is fun and interesting and it feels like a real departure from his other stuff, it feels almost like Wes Anderson does an Indiana Jones film, honestly. It felt more inspired by action adventure films of old than any of his previous work. And I thought that was interesting, but I definitely thought that it was more of a shallow one-note take on storytelling than a lot of his other work. I definitely think that the critique that is leveled at him all the time, that he's more style over substance, is normally quite untrue and unfair. In this film, I can see it. And honestly, I haven't disliked a Wes Anderson film this much since Moonrise Kingdom, which I feel very similarly about. I watched K-pop Demon Hunters. Everyone has been asking me to do this. Everyone loves this movie. The reason why I actually watched this movie is because all 3 of my nieces and my nephew were obsessed with it, and I've watched it over and over and over again. They are between the ages of 3 and 10, and they absolutely love this movie. Apparently, this movie's on track to being Netflix's most watched movie ever, and I can see why. What I like about this movie is that it reminded me of old Cartoon Network shows like Powerpuff Girls and Totally Spies and Dexter's Laboratory. It felt like a kid's show that was not afraid of, or Samurai Jack is a good comparison, a kid's show that wasn't afraid of violence and introducing these more complex visuals and ideas to kids without really trying to get on that Pixar level of depth and character development. I found it interesting because I asked my nieces and nephew what their favorite characters were before we watched it, and all the girls said Rumi, and my nephew, who is so cute, said, oh my God, I can't remember what these 2 other than their names are, but he's they're not getting the respect that they deserve. And I was that's adorable. But then I watched the movie and I understood why the favorite character was Rumi, is because this movie is very straightforward. It's not really what I feel I've become accustomed to with animated films, which is a more adult narrative that introduces these other characters in a more complex way. Obviously, Rumi's the main character, and then there's the demon guy that has more depth. So I'm not saying that there aren't other characters with depth, but I do think that this film was unafraid to be a film that was primarily marketed and targeted to children and what children's interests were and children's attention spans, while also still being a very good and well-made film. So I thought this was interesting, and obviously since it's so successful, there'll probably be tons of sequels now that have plenty of time for these 2 ladies to get maybe their own story. But it was really cute and the songs are really good. Yeah. However, the animated film that is on Netflix that I was completely blown away by is Lost in Starlight. This movie came out earlier this year, and it is absolutely gorgeous. This is a romantic movie about an astronaut who loses her mother, who is also an astronaut, on a trip to space, and she grows up and wants to be an astronaut as well. And she meets this musician and they fall in love, but she still wants to be an astronaut, and there's this conflict in their relationship because that's a big thing to ask somebody to wait for you while you go for like months, maybe years to go to Mars. This film is like, it honestly, it feels like it takes place in like the Blade Runner universe, but it's a lot more hopeful and optimistic and beautiful. It's very like surrealist at times. And this is exactly an example of why I love animation so much, because this story would be really, really hard to visualize in live action. And it's just, you're able to be swept up in the romance and the whimsy and at times the existential dread in a way that is really uninhibited, because the visuals just flow so beautifully and there's no choppy CGI or whatever. It's gorgeous and stunning, and this movie is one of my favorite films of the year. I love it so much. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend. So yeah, there's 4 movies that I saw from this year.